Alright guys, we are going to begin our new unit 4, looking at World War I and the beginning of it, and we're going to look into the causes of World War I and the U.S. entering it. So first, thank you. First of all, I want to take a look at the main causes into World War I. This is the first time we're going to look at, countries jumping in to back up other countries. And so I want to walk you through the major reasons behind that. So the underlying causes to the explosion of World War I, first was militarism. We saw many European powers like Britain and France and Germany, who had huge industrial forces, begin to want to use those industrial forces to build up their military arms. And so it escalated the tension to use those. The second major reason and cause of World War I, we see our alliances. And these were groups of countries who made treaties with another, aligned themselves so that they would be protected in the case of being attacked. And so it was very intricate systems. You can see here in World War I, we'll see the Allies, which include France and Britain and Russia. Eventually the United States will join in on the Allies. And then on the opposite side, we call the other side the Triple Alliance or Triple Entente. And this included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Now these are the three major powerhouses in either side. Although there were smaller nations in each category, these were the three major countries. We also had the Ottoman Empire, which include a lot of the Middle Eastern areas, including like Serbia and Bulgaria, and actually the Ottoman Empire itself. Triple Alliance and the Ottoman Empire actually came together and molded themselves into what we will call them as the Central Powers in World War I. Another cause to World War I was imperialism. As we saw in the imperialism unit before this, there was just a rivalry over expanding markets, expanding European trade, gaining new colonies, using that sphere of influence, and especially focusing in on the continents in Africa and Asia. Nationalism is going to grow again. We saw a huge surge in nationalism after the War of 1812 and into the Jacksonian era. Well, it comes back again. We are sort of healed up, beginning to heal a little from the Civil War, and so now our focuses are on outside of our borders. So we will see a love of the country grow, not only in the United States, but in other countries. I'm very patriotic and willing to fight and stand up for your country. Now, one of the immediate causes, so the previous imperialisms like nationalism, imperialism, militarism, those are all concepts and themes that fed into World War I. We can find evidence of each of those. But when we actually look at the events that sparked the cause of the war, we get into the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And the Archduke was from Austria-Hungary. He was actually the heir to the throne. And in 1914, he visited the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo. And while on this visit, he is shot by a Serbian nationalist. And his name was Gavrilo Princip. And this really sparked a lot of controversy, just particularly between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. And so war was declared on July 8th, Austria-Hungary against Serbia. And we really thought that that would end quick. However, the fire grew, and because of alliances, now many countries began to fall into this war, one after the other. So here you can see, some of the alliances. We have Germany that will align with Austria-Hungary. Serbia that's going to align itself with the Allied powers. Again, earlier I mentioned the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria will also become a part of the Central Powers on the opposite side. And here you see Spain, Sweden, and Norway and other areas like the Netherlands and Switzerland who will stay neutral. All right. Now, the two main areas of fighting really focused in France and in Germany. But when Serbia and Austria-Hungary went to war, we saw a big domino effect of countries fighting. Once Germany jumped in and aided Austria-Hungary after they had declared war on Serbia, Germany created what we now call as the Schlieffen Plan. And in this plan, the idea was instead of going directly for Russia, which was a huge landmass for Germany to take over, they first thought, let's capture Belgium, then we'll go for Paris, France, and once France falls, then we will go after Russia with those two army forces instead of having to split their soldiers in half. Belgium did fall, and Germany was successful there. However, Allied troops stopped the advancement of German soldiers in France in September of 1914 at the area we call the Marne. And this is where we see a huge impact of trench warfare, and especially in northeastern France. So again, you can see here the northeastern part in the Marne in 1914. We see an intricate line of trench warfare in northeastern France. And then Germany will also begin to use its army to start making attacks toward Russia as well. You can see other areas that will be areas of fighting throughout the war, but most of it you're going to see this trench warfare here in France. So a little bit about trench warfare. It was intricate ditch networks, really, and this is where the armies fought. It really was a stalemate. These trenches had dugouts and they had underground rooms, and officers had their quarters and command posts, and they were really complex. And most of the time, soldiers spent their daily lives in and out in these trenches. One of the most popular battles with the trenches is the Battle of Somme, which lasted from July to November. And we call trench warfare a stalemate because there was such a huge amount of casualties. However, not much land was ever gained from trench warfare. So you would fight for months and months on end with little ground have ever changed hands between two sides. All right. And so on the first day of the Battle of Somme, the British side lost over 60,000 soldiers, just to kind of put it into perspective. So a little bit about how trench warfare worked. You had what was in the middle called no man's land. And in this area, you would have barbed wire, mines, grenades, to slow down the advancing side coming towards you. And automatic weapons were used as well to, shoot down troops once close enough and in range. But one of the biggest defeats was what we call trench foot, because these men sat in, waterlogged ditches for days on end. Their feet would become inundated in water because our skin is like a sponge and we just absorb it in. And so the soldiers' feet would become infected by it. Here you can see a layout of the trench itself, and this is one side. You would have the enemy on the other with basically the same exact layout. No man's land in the middle, your trench in the front, and then intricate systems in the back with the dugout. All right, and then you can see here some of the propaganda pieces that came out of the war with trench feet, helping provide clean goods, to help the soldiers out. And here is an example of what it looked like with trench foot disease. So the United States, when the war broke out in 1914, the United States was really on the fence of its position to take. And so the United States stayed out of the war. We took a stance of neutrality. Many Americans thought that this was a European conflict and we had no place to be involved. And it wasn't of our best interest to join in, let Britain and France and Germany duke it out on their own. President Wilson actually got reelected on the term of he campaigned to keep us out of war, and that was his slogan. He wanted to delay war for as long as he possibly could. Now here you see a political cartoon that really stretched Wilson, because we know that he will only be able to stay out of the war so long. We will eventually enter it, and in the process we didn't stay fully out of war. In the United States, we saw many different groups and beliefs on role in the war. So we had a huge divide. On one side, you had the socialists who thought the war was, a capitalist and imperialist struggle between Germany and England over markets and colonies in China and Africa and the Middle East. Then you had a group of imperialists who, again, those imperialists who just thought that this was about dominating and taking new lands. Then we have the pacifists who looked at war as an evil and we need to stay out, not get involved, and we need to set an example. One example of that was a lawyer and politician named William Jennings Bryan, who believed that this is an evil and that we need to set the example. So William Jennings Bryan, Cross of Gold speech, comes back to give his thoughts on the war. And then you have the huge influx of immigrants in the United States and their ties, because many of these immigrants came from these countries where the war is occurring. And so you have many of them who are feeling sympathetic and feeling that we should step in to help, okay? But many of the people in America felt to Britain, and that's where a lot of our alliances will stand. Well, tomorrow we will take a look at the United States entering the war and what caused us to change that neutrality zone to let's join in and fight this war.